Dane, how's it going?
Doing well. Yeah. It's a great day today.
Yeah, cool. Excited to have you on. Why don't you tell the audience a bit about your background and what you're working on today, Pinwheel as well too.
Yeah, sure. I'm a second time entrepreneur. I am a trained engineer. And after coming out of school, I started a company called Meshify in Texas, in Houston, actually. And in that company, we built an IoT framework and we actually sold it to a Fortune 500 called Munich Re out of Munich, Germany in 2016. And then coming out of that experience, I did a couple of years of earnout at the big company and was really thinking about what I wanted to do next and what I wanted to be when I grow up, so to speak. And I have some kids. I'm a dad. It's a big part of my life. And so looking at their use of technology became a center point of my research around that time in 2019. And it was just coming out that there was all these articles and things that were stating that social media in particular was really known to be bad for kids. And I dove down the rabbit hole, studied a ton about it, downloaded a bunch of parental control applications, and used the main applications from Google and Apple. And I found that all of the tools I found didn't quite solve what I was looking to do with my family. And so I jumped in and started a kids smartphone company called Pinwheel, where we make a social media free first phone for kids. We do all the software on top of Android, but we actually, buy the phones from reputable providers like Samsung. And so we're really the experience provider, but we sell those phones directly to consumers. So it's a D2C company, and we also sell a subscription with each phone that we sell. So that started about 5 years ago, and we've grown significantly, raised venture capital, gotten all the way to profitability, and have about 60 people that work at the company today.
Really cool. And I want to come back to Pinwheel in a second, but first I want to touch on, right, you lived a lot of the dream a lot of people think of, right? Where you go build a company, you eventually go sell that company, and it buys you that autonomy, right? Not during the year now, I'm sure, but during the process after, right? We're like, okay, I now potentially have enough, whether it be in cash flow, in balance sheet, where it gives that ability to go think freely, right? It gives that ability to go say, hey, what do I want to do when I grow up in terms of what I want to go build, what do I put my time into, where do I want to go do it? But walk us through that journey of actually building a company, and what was that process like in selling it? Right? Because a lot of people have these goals and ambitions, but you've done it and can help us understand what that looks like leading up to it.
Yeah, I think it looks different for different people. When I started the first company, Meshify, it was with my best friend and business partner. And, we were very young. We were 26 years old. I had a corporate job that was paying $55,000 a year, my first job out of college. And I told my business partner and friend, I said, hey, if we do anything better than 55,000 a year over the next few years, we could call this a win. And even if we don't do better than 55,000 a year, I think the lessons that we'll learn in this journey will be well worth the cost of admission, given how young we are and how little money we're making. So that my framework was not to take over the world and build $1 billion company. Maybe that's why I didn't. There's some argument for that, but you could say that it set the bar at a realistic level and allowed us, when the time came about 5 years later, to get an exit that made us both independently wealthy. We were able to easily say yes and say, hey, this isn't the only journey we're going to take. This isn't the only thing we're going to do in our careers. But getting that early win allowed us to build what we wanted to build next and do what we want to do next and control our destiny. So it wasn't a tough choice. I hear other people say that it is a tough choice for them, but I think because we were very clear about the goal at the start, when the time came, it was fairly easy to say, yeah, let's take this first win and move forward.
Yeah, and that's, I think, a really big thing too, is like understanding what the end in mind is you actually want to accomplish, right? And being open-minded, like having a clear end in mind where this is for you, a learning experience and also a path to allow yourself that freedom to go figure out what it was you want to go do. And with that in mind, like, what was that transition process? Because you often hear a lot of horror stories of, yeah, this group came in, they bought my company, I built it for 5 years myself, maybe with a partner. I have all this autonomy. I can do what I want. And this big, company or private equity firm comes in, they buy us, and this period of 2-3 years to maximize my profit is just brutal. What was it like for you?
I would say that we were lucky in a sense to get an acquirer that really wanted, made a concerted effort not to break the culture and the company that they had bought. And so they left us as a separate corporate entity. They didn't completely absorb us. They left our brand intact and, in fact, invested in the brand. You can still go to meshify.com today and see what they've done with it, which continues to operate. The first year, I was actually very happy. The second year, it did get more tough. I think as an entrepreneur, you're always in this position where you want to own sort of the value of the work that you put out, and you also want very few bureaucratic hurdles in what you're working on. And after having that for several years, for me, it was pretty difficult to continue to fight against, especially the middle management bureaucracy. Whereas I think the higher end management really, did buy into giving us a lot of autonomy. I think as time wears on, sometimes the middle management just can't help themselves but to try to get involved. And that is not always fun. So, my co-founder and I took different routes. I left after the earnout period to go start something new. He actually stayed on, has continued to be promoted and do great things at the company within the organization, and is actually still there to this day. So, I think as an entrepreneur, you can take different routes with what you do with that exit. But for me, yeah, it was, I would say that way. It was easy at first, got harder, and eventually, made most sense for me to jump out and start something new, which, to be honest, I think I kind of knew right when I sold the company. I think it was very likely. I knew it was very likely that would be the outcome.
Yeah, and I feel like some people, they just value that autonomy and the creative piece of it more than anything else, right? In terms of the ability to go create your own thing and actually own what's behind it and the decision making behind it, right? And truly having it be your own. Where some people may like creating on a bigger scale, even if they own less of it, or if they have certain guardrails they have to go follow too. So now that you break free from the earnout, right? You've made yourself a level of wealth where you can go be more creative and kind of think of what you want to do, be more intentional, right? How'd you land on, and how quickly did you land on creating Pinwheel, or was there something else between that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was very intentional on this process. I hear so many entrepreneurs that say, hey, I jumped out and I was already running my next company and I was already on to the next idea. I'm not sure how they do that so quickly. For me, I wanted a lot of intentionality around the next project that I worked on. I wanted it had certain criteria that I needed to meet. I was a lot wiser than I was the first time around. It was, hey, I want it to be a huge market need and have a lot of pull in the market. I want it to be really important to me personally, and I want it to be able to actually have a large outcome. So there were several criteria I was looking for, and I have a lot of ideas. I think a lot of us entrepreneurs have a lot of ideas. And so I learned in my first company that testing those ideas through sort of market validation first, very important. Don't just jump out and build and start trying to, sell your first idea. It's really about validating the market, figuring out if everyone else feels the same way that you feel. And through that process, these ideas get refined. So I spent about 10 months in what I called a lab, like a lab state, where I had, no job, not sure what I was doing. To my wife, it might have been just unemployment, but, I worked on about 7 ideas in that 10 months, and they went to various points in development. They at least got market surveys and interviews done, right? And some of them were killed after that. Some of them I built web pages for, like marketing pages for, drove traffic to them through sort of online ad means or other means, and then saw what kind of email conversions I would get or pre-sale conversions I would get. All of them included surveys and interviews, right? And when I got to the idea of Pinwheel, the response was multiples of anything else I had looked at. I mean, it was like the conversion rates on the emails were 3 times higher. The number of interviews I would land was 5 times higher. I'm a bit making up these numbers because I don't remember exactly, but everything was multiples on what I was doing on the other ideas. And so it really gave me a lot of confidence that I wasn't the only person that had this problem. And then from there, I actually dove in and did the deepest research I'd done on any idea to date in this project, where I actually worked with an ethnographer, and we did a deep dive into 50 families' daily life with their tech, looked through everything from morning to night, how they managed their tech with their kids, what tech they gave their kids, what kind of struggles they were having. So we did this deep dive with just 50 families in this ethnographic study, and it really helped to build the foundational market and brand that we were going after with Pinwheel, and also helped inform the product. I would say the product was still very much 1.0 after this, but at least it gave us that first kernel of like, here's all the ideas we could work on with this first phone product. It has definitely evolved since then, but I think that was a super valuable process to go through.
Yeah, and you made a huge point, right? I think at times people just go dive into something and say, hey, we'll go figure it out. Or they go build all this stuff before they actually go test and learn. And I think part of this for you was you earned that right to go take your time from the first company you built in terms of giving that runway to go really intentional with what you do. And then you made another huge thing too. Like I'm a big believer in, sell it first and then go figure it out after, right? Because you know what the market actually wants. You can go iterate much more quickly there from actually having customer feedback, where at times I think people spend way too much time on perfecting something. And then in turn, they go to market and you're like, okay, this was not what the market wanted at all because it was perfect to you, but not to everyone else. And I think for you, kind of really validating those ideas and seeing what actually has legs, right? If I build this the right way, what has the most legs and responsiveness, right? So that way that path can be a lot easier and there's actually something there.
Exactly. I think you nailed it. I made all those mistakes in my first company. We spent, I'd say 2 years, 2.5 years in the wilderness stage, I'd call it, in my first company, where instead of doing this market research, this market validation, and really understanding, who we were selling to and why, we had this grand technology as engineers, both of us, we had this grand sort of technology vision, and we went and built really cool technology. And then we sort of said, like, who wants this, and then it turned out to be completely random, different companies in different sectors. And really that company ended up growing from those initial mistakes, I think at a lower rate than it would have had we built applications directly into some markets. I could go farther into that, but basically we ended up building a platform that could do many things for many people, and that ended up being valuable to our acquirer, so that's good. But it never was a gigantic business before we sold it. It's actually gotten much bigger since the acquirer brought it on and really took that platform and targeted it at certain applications, and that's what's really helped the company to scale.
Yeah. So more so you almost feel not lucky, but kind of lucky with how the product actually fit a bigger company that had more meaningful distribution for that product.
Yeah, for sure. There's a huge sense of luck in everything we do as entrepreneurs. I mean, I was part of an accelerator program in that first company where they did 4 years of companies. It was kind of a small accelerator, and they did maybe 12 companies a year. But out of those 50 companies, something like that, there's only been one or two exits. And I mean, there's still some that I think will still come about even now, more than 10 years later, that are still growing. But and those people worked just as hard as we did. They did, put in a lot of effort. They had, and so in some sense you have to feel, like, yeah, I made some right choices and made some good moves, but there's a sense of, there's no question that there's some luck involved as well, as far as
Sure.
especially getting to an exit outcome that's favorable, where you really want as a company to be bought, not to ever be selling. You don't really want to go to market and say, I'm selling this asset. You really want someone to come and say, yes, we're buying. And that's how you get,
And
better outcomes.
and as you're building it, did you guys take on capital? Did you have a lot of debt? Like, what did that structure look like in terms of getting you to the place where you did have the appetite for someone to go ahead, eventually buy you?
Yeah, in the first company, we only raised about 1.2 million in venture capital. We raised from one institution and the rest angel investors. And, we were only at about $1 million in revenue annually when we sold the company. And so we got many multiples on that, luckily. But, the good side was that my co-founder and I owned, 70% plus of the business between the two of us. And, our cap table was pretty clean. And so it really was a life-changing event for us, even though it was a small 8-figure exit. It was it made a big difference in our lives and allowed us to go on to do something else. So, yeah, anyway, hopefully that answers the question.
Sure. And now as you're building Pinwheel, right, you go to market, you go do deep dive studies with 50 families, right? From there, kind of what did that data tell you as to how you go to market going forward, right? Kind of how do you leverage what you found to kind of build the product the right way?
Yeah, so we killed several ideas that I had within the product. So you've got this large idea of, okay, we need to do a kid-specific smartphone that's really built for kids from the ground up, that's defaulted for kids, not something that you have to sort of add parental controls to afterwards and try to sort of whack-a-mole the loopholes, but from the get-go is already loophole-free. So that's the big idea. And then within that, there's a lot of small ideas. Like there's a lot of ideas, like, hey, maybe we could bring in chores, right? Maybe we could bring in, the money piece of like how you, sort of compensate kids. So bring in their allowance, right? We killed all those ideas off of customer feedback and really saw that the heart of what customers were asking for was really just the well done version of exactly what I described. So things like no social media, no open web browser. I mean, those are directly from customer feedback and customer interviews. When you talk to parents and ask them, what they're looking for, and you show them different designs and different, feature sets, they just straight told us. And then, of course, you go out and sell it. And some of the ideas continue to refine as you get customer feedback with actual real world impact, where the customers start to use the product. That's when you really can get the feedback rolling to a whole nother extent, which is super helpful. It's just a matter of building the processes and the systems and people to actually go gather that feedback and then act on it, which is the whole game.
So basically, you went back in time and created a phone that just has way less functionality for, like, strips off all these new advancements of technology for them to be like super, super simple for the children.
Well, that's what we started with, right? We started with 85 curated apps and really nothing, not much else, right? A parental app that could help, sort of control and monitor this kid's phone. And then over time, as you earn the right to reinvest in your product, you can build many more features. And so we've kind of grown with our kids as they've grown up, and we've added the ability to grow with your child. So it's really about graduation pathways for us. The ultimate goal is not to just leave a kid on a completely dumb phone that doesn't do anything. It's to graduate them to an adult phone that they are totally in command of and is not ruining their lives, right? It's actually something that's helping them to reach their goals and helping them to be incredibly superhumans, right? Incredible superhumans. So we added a lot of features that would give the kids more control and more access and more permissions as they mature and prove they're ready for it. So it's more about, giving those permissions and growing with the children. Now we have over 1,500 apps that we've curated from those original 85 that if you stay within the walled garden of Pinwheel in the first stage, you get to choose from and get all these descriptions as a parent as to what is available to your kids and what's going to be on those apps. Because as a parent, you feel like this is a huge job to do, just to review these apps and see what's in them. The App Store descriptions are not helpful. So we wrote our own descriptions from a parental perspective of all these 1,500 curated apps so that you can see really what's in them and then choose from them. And then even beyond that, if your child is getting into the teenage years and you want to stay with this phone for some of the safety reasons, you can actually break out of that curated app experience and go straight to the App Store. You can activate, you can have your kids, your teens basically be on the App Store, or you can turn it on briefly and then turn it back off if you want to take apps from the entire wide universe of the Android Play Store. You can get anything now on a Pinwheel, with the exception of social media. So we still just say, hey, if your kids are ready for social media, then they're ready for something that's really an adult phone. So the social media line is a line that we've held, throughout all of our product experience. No social media on Pinwheel phones.
Got it. And kind of what are you seeing as that age where the kids fully graduate from using a Pinwheel phone?
It's not really age specific. It's really, that's kind of a dodging the question. In general, you see it in the 15 to 18 category. So, in mid to late high school. So you'll see sophomores, juniors, seniors, somewhere in that range where, our parents are saying like, hey, let's be done with this. But even at that age of like 8th, 9th, and 10th grade, you're seeing the Pinwheel phone is very different experience than what it is for a 5th, 6th, 7th grader, right? So it starts very, very simple. By the time they're in 8th, 9th grade, it would be, almost a full-on smartphone. By the time, depending on your family and your kids, somewhere between 10th and 12th grade, they're probably saying like, hey, we don't really need this. We don't really need this anymore. Kids are ready, right?
And then walk us through the actual business model and like your go-to-market behind this, right? Is it that they're buying a phone one-off and they have subscription? Like, what does that look like in terms of how the company actually produces revenue?
Yeah, we buy phones wholesale from major name brand providers like Samsung, Google Pixels, Motorola's. We provision them as default kid phones, meaning we put on not just one piece of software, but about 7 pieces of software using the same type of technology that a corporation would use if they were buying phones for their workforce. So it's called mobile device management. That's the name of the category of software. And it's deeper than just an over-the-top parental control app you could get from the App Store. It has to be installed from root, meaning right when the phone is booted up, this software needs to be installed to get certain administrative permissions to get full control over the phone. So that kind of corporate tool we sort of brought to the consumer for the first time. And it allows really a loophole free experience by picking the right models putting on the mobile device management, tailoring all of our apps to make sure, and testing all of our apps to make sure they totally are compatible with this phone. We sort of take responsibility for the whole banana. But as far as making it, we don't make the actual hardware, right? That'd be kind of silly. We can just get great phones off the shelf that have all the QA done and all the warranties attached and things like that. All the case compatibility, all that complexity we're able to, wave off to someone else. And then we're able to just buy these phones wholesale, sell them at retail with a small markup on the hardware. And then really the core of the business is the subscription. So we sell a software subscription with every phone that we sell. We are actually just about to launch wireless at Pinwheel so that you can actually buy the calling and texting and all that from us as well to have just one simple bill. And so that's going to launch very soon. But up until today, we've just sold software and hardware, and then people have activated these phones on whatever network they would like. And so that's been the main business model. And the subscription is the heart of the business.
Got it. Okay. Very cool. And then kind of like, what does that run for someone, right? Who's looking to go put the software on their phone, right? They buy a phone from you. Kind of what does a software piece run?
Yeah, depending on if you buy it like monthly or annually, it'll be somewhere around 17, $18 a month. It could be down to $15 a month if you buy it annually. So yeah, it's in that range. And then when you add in a, $12 to $15, cell phone bill, you might be in the $25 to $30 a month range in total, again, depending on, if you want to invest more and get lower cost monthly to buy an annual or how you want to pay for it.
Sure. And then I'm sure with this being kind of the heart and focus of your business, definitely leads you to parent your own kids a certain way, right? Kind of what you're going to talk us through, maybe a controversial view on parenting that you have when you start thinking of social media, you start thinking of screen time and all these things that are becoming more and more prevalent, right, with kids now growing up in this age. So help understand from your take, what does it look like for you?
Well, I don't think my take is that controversial anymore. I mean, the research is out, the word is out. I think a ton of parents understand and know that it's not helpful or healthy for your kids, especially middle schoolers, to be on social media really at all. And so, I think there may be some parents who still feel that they're, socially forced into it, that their kids are telling them that they're feeling ostracized or they'll feel othered if they're, if they're not on these tools. And I would say, refer to like Jonathan Haidt's framework of communities make a difference. We really need to, as communities, take a stand that there should not be social media, especially in middle school years, for our kids to be on. Let them be on more monitored spaces to still connect. They can text each other. They can call each other. There's plenty of communication kids can do outside of social media. And when they tell you, especially on sort of apps that want to obfuscate their data from parents' view or from anyone's view, things like Snapchat with disappearing messages and things like that. These are just very, very bad ideas. And we hear it all the time, unfortunately, from parents like, hey, we're not that family. We hear these stories in the news, or we hear other people have trouble with their kids being, caught up in some sort of sexploitation or caught up in some sort of, sending inappropriate pictures to each other or things like that. Like, that just wasn't our family. That wasn't our kid. That wasn't us. Like, that was never going to be us. And you don't just trust me when I tell you, middle schoolers are curious. They're just normal humans. They want to be accepted by their peers. They do not have a fully developed brain to make always super wise decisions, regardless of how much we love them and trust them and know they're good people, because they are. They're in middle school or they're in early high school, and they're not going to make the best decision every time. So help them by putting boundaries in place is always our plea to parents. Just put the boundaries in place and help them get through this stage of sort of digital wilderness at this age, where these tools and these apps that are built for adults, they're not thinking about the well-being of your child. That's your job. And so we just try to help make that as easy as possible and help hold some lines and some boundaries for you. So maybe you don't always have to be the bad guy.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense too. Like, I think about growing up myself, like I'm 30 and all this came in my high school was like just coming out, right? In terms of technology, having phones. So I can imagine going forward now, right? I've been out of high school for what, 12, 13 years, right? So, like, I imagine like that's just progressed a ton in terms of just the access that kids have to all these kind of things. It's like how much it shifts perspective and how they think and all the above.
Yeah. It's really, especially social media, especially comparison with others. I mean, the data is there. I mean, A lot of people say, oh, there's been tech scares before. There was MTV in the 90s, or there was, video games were destroying the kids with violence. I always tell parents, the difference between, right, what's happening with social media and those previous sort of crying wolves is that those were not consensus research backed proposals. Those were sort of one-off, sort of, you would say, people who got notoriety by being contrarian to the research and saying, video games causes violence, right? There was no consensus research back approach that came out and said, hey, video games cause violence. There wasn't a Surgeon General's warning that came out from our federal government that said video games cause violence. That's because the link between video games and violence is extraordinarily weak. It's probably non-existent. So, I think there's this thing in our brain where we've heard wolf a few times in our lives as parents, and we don't. Some of us were resistant to that. I would say when you look at social media and kids, the research is really overwhelming and it's highly consensus driven. Now, the people who say it's not a problem, those are the people who are the outliers. And there is a Surgeon General's warning against, these digital tools for kids. So I think you are definitely on solid ground by making the decision, with your family to keep middle schoolers and early high schoolers off of social media.
And kind of shifting gears a bit too, right? I know your first company you mentioned, you sold about $1 million of revenue, right? Pinwheel looks like you've scaled a lot more so, right? 60 plus employees. What's one of the big drivers of what's allowed you to scale kind of outside of the research component and testing the market component, right? What's really enabled you to go scale much more efficiently with your current company versus your first one?
Yeah, I think we have strong product market fit. I mean, it's not rocket science. When you have strong product market fit and the market is pulling from you as opposed to you always having to push, so many things are easier than they would be otherwise. I mean, partnerships come to you, influencers come to you, people come and say, let's do deals, let's get your name in front of more people. Press comes to you and says, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? And explain it to me, right? So we've gotten so much earned media. We've gotten so many influencer deals. We've gotten, such, I'd say, higher conversion rates through traditional ads, even all from having a product that matches what the market is looking for. And so, it's not hyperbolic to say really product market fit is everything in business. I mean, you'll just look like a business genius if you have product market fit, and you'll look like you know nothing about business if you don't have product market fit. And so really, that's what you're really looking for is finding the product that matches with that market, and then everything else is so much easier. That's not to say that execution doesn't matter, because you still need to make good decisions. You still need to have strong financial management. You still need to have strong hiring and all the basics that you need to scale and grow a business. You need to not, but at that point, you're just basically not trying to screw it up. It's like, let me not screw this up because otherwise things are going well. All right. Whereas if you don't have product market fit, you're just constantly beating your head against a wall and maybe feeling terrible about yourself because there's really nothing that you're doing besides just working on the wrong thing.
It sounds so simple, right? Of like, be in the right time with the right place and do some level of testing beforehand to go make sure that it is what you're building the market actually wants, right? I think you did a great job of that here too, in terms of just diving deep beforehand that you can have this momentum to once things actually start moving.
Yeah, I mean, so many people fall in love with their idea. I mean, I think that's the biggest mistake entrepreneurs make is they become in love with their idea. And it's like, hey, this is what I want. This is what the world needs. I'm just so sure that this is going to work because I am so convinced of it. And it's a trap. It's a trap. You are not the only customer you need. And in fact, a small cohort of customers can be the worst possible scenario, because you'll get just enough signal to make you see that other people really care about this problem and are really giving you a lot of praise. But what you might fail to see is that this small cohort does not a company make, right? And so I think that's the hard thing to tease out, especially if you get caught in that trap of finding a very small niche of customers that love what you're doing, but there's no vision to go from here to maybe the next features or the next segment of the market, right? So it is good to have that first niche market that really loves what you're doing, but you also need to have a very clear vision of, okay, what do we need to add to capture that next segment and that next segment if you're going to grow out of that, that trap.
I honestly compare this to, so I played bass my whole life growing up, and I have a lot of friends who played as well, who were better than I was, right? Who had been playing minor league ball for 8, 9, 10 years, and they were just good enough to go hang around long enough, but then in turn, they weren't good enough to go make that jump. And you have that false hope that you can make it and you're close by having those, people who believe in you or in their turn having those access to go play those games. But when you look at it, like you were never really on that path to getting to the place of scale or getting to the place of like truly making it. And it's the worst place to go live in. And it just ends up being a massive, massive, massive time suck. So I think what you're saying makes a ton of sense of like truly validating, can you go past that niche that you started with to go grow beyond that? Or are you going to have a very, very small company that you feel like you're banging your head against the wall to go try and grow?
Exactly. Yeah. And that can be a very hard place to be in because there's certainly companies who stay in that space for 12 months or so and they just figure out, a slight pivot, a slight product improvement. They find a deeper vein to hit, right? They might have nicked an artery, but now they find some small pivot they make to really hit the gusher. And it's very hard to know if you're in that space where am I close to the gusher and I just need to persevere a little longer? And I mean, there's no general advice that can help with this. It's very case specific. And in this case, I would say you just need, if you're in that position, you need really good advisors. You need other people around you who care about you and your company, who not just care about you and your company, but have the experience of being able to help see it from the outside and give you, some good advice. So I think having a community around you of other entrepreneurs can be really helpful if you find yourself in that position to see, what tests can I run? What more data can I gather, to really understand where you're at.
Yeah, I mean, all really great points here too. And before we wrap up here too, what are you most excited about going forward, whether it be personal, business, kind of what excites you going forward in the future coming up?
I mean, this is the thing everyone I think a business is excited about, but it's AI. I mean, I think AI is just a gigantic tidal wave of technological shift that's happening. And I think entrepreneurs, we're kind of wired for a little bit of the chaos and change. So whereas a lot of people maybe are afraid or scared or, not sure what the future brings, I think an entrepreneur gets really excited about a massive technological shift because we believe that we're going to be able to see the opportunities and we're going to be able to take advantage of them and going to be able to build new things of great value to many, many people based on this technological shift. So that's what I spend a lot of my time on is studying, working with, and really diving in on AI and how it can be applied really to kids, teens, and youths to help them become super incredible people.
And what's one meaningful way you guys have used AI so far to go apply it to how kids can go leverage it via what you're doing?
Yeah. We launched a product called Pinwheel GPT, and it's basically an OpenAI wrapper app that gives kids safe answers to your kids, and also gives you as a parent access in your own phone to the questions and answers that your kids are asking AI. So, simple answers, vocabulary correct, short answers, always safe, opts out of anything controversial, and then gives you full access and oversight to what it is that they're asking and what they're doing with AI. And so that product's been going really well. It's been, widely adopted within our community. We're getting a lot of we're in that same feedback loop now where we're getting more feedback on what we could do to make it better and make it awesome. That's just, sort of the first thing we've launched, but there's more, definitely more things on the radar.
Cool. Dane, super excited to see what you guys keep building. And yeah, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate it. It's been fun.